Boker Tov, good morning. How would you like to speak after Michelle Bachmann? I mean, really, you need a miracle. You need a miracle. You're amazing. We love you here. We love you here. We miss you in Washington, really. To my dear colleague and friend, Robert Alatov, to the friends at the Allies United for Israel, good morning, good morning. Now, it doesn't look like I've just come off a battlefield, okay? This doesn't look like your standard uniform, but trust me, I've just come off a battlefield, all right? All wars in history eventually become wars of history. No sooner did the guns fall silent in any war than the war about what the war was about. Was it justified? Was it unjustified? Was the outcome good? Was it bad? That's the war. And no war is more controversial in history than the Six-Day War 50 years ago. We've been battling it ever since, and the height of the battle is right now, today. You don't realize it, but you're in a battlefield. And Michelle Bachmann spoke so passionately about the reunification of this city, but friends, the fight goes on between those who say that the Six-Day War was initiated by Israel to expand territorially, to expel the Palestinians, a land grab, and that after the war, Israel did not hold out its hand in peace, but simply rejected Arab requests for peace over and over again. And the other side of the battlefield, which says, no, Israel did not expect the war, didn't anticipate the war, did everything possible to prevent the war, a war of self-defense, a war of survival. And after that war, and to this very day, Israel has held out its hand in peace, and that hand has been slapped away. Those are the battle lines. And to decide this battle, we have to go back. You can't fight it without knowing what happened 50 years ago. What this country looked like on June 4th, the day before the war, 1967. A tiny country that was 9 miles wide. At its narrowest point, 2.5 million people, many of them survivors of the Holocaust, refugees from oppression in Arab lands. Most of them had lived through the War of Independence, in which the Egyptian army was right down the road, folks, laying siege to Jerusalem with the Jordanian army, 100,000 Jews without food and water. The Egyptian army almost conquered Tel Aviv, 25 miles from Tel Aviv. 1% of the population killed in 1948. Know what that would be in American terms, in European terms? 1% of the population? And then suddenly, in June 1967, Arab armies massed on all borders. This city divided with a wall right up the street from here, with snipers on that wall picking off Israeli citizens on this side of the wall. Jews denied access to their holiest sites. And masses of people in Baghdad, Beirut, Damascus, protesting, demanding a war to drive the Jews into the sea, and Arab leaders swore that there would not be one survivor. And Israel is completely isolated in the world. It's incredible to think about that. Today, China, hostile country. India, hostile country. A place called the Soviet bloc, remember it? The Soviet Union with 12 satellite countries, all hostile. The United States, a friendly country, but not an allied country. The Israel Defense Forces didn't get one bullet from the United States. Israel had one ally in June 1967. It was France. And on the evening of the war, the French switched sides. Completely alone. Completely alone. And in the face of this horrible threat, what do Israeli leaders do? They reach out. They send secret messages to Arab leaders. Please don't fight. They send our foreign minister, Abi Ibn, to Paris, to London, to the United States, to beg for diplomatic support, and he gets absolutely nothing. And so Israel decides to launch a preemptive strike, not against Jordan, not against Syria, not even against all of Egypt, a very limited objective of taking out the Egyptian Air Force and moving the Egyptian army away from the border. And that happens on the morning of June 5th. On June 5th, something incredible happens. The entire Egyptian Air Force is destroyed within 2 hours. 400 airplanes on the ground. Nobody thought it was going to work. The Egyptian army not only gets pushed away from the border, it runs to the Suez Canal. There was no plans to get to the Suez Canal. Israel ends up taking the Sinai Peninsula, which is 3 times the size of this country, in a matter of a day and a half. There was no plan to go on the Gaza Strip. The Palestinians began firing us at the Gaza Strip, so we had to go on the Gaza Strip. There was no plans to take the Syrian Golan Heights, but the Syrians opened fire on us with thousands and thousands of shells fired at our farms and our settlements in the Galilee. We had no choice but to shoot back. And there was no plan to reunify Jerusalem. That's the amazing thing. The last thing, the prime minister of Israel, a gentleman named Levi Eshkol, sweet man, he wrote to King Hussein of Jordan saying, please, please don't shoot at us. And what did the Jordanians do? Well, the Egyptians were there. They gave the command to the Jordanian army. The Jordanian army began to fire into this city right where we're sitting. Can you imagine artillery shells falling right here? Thousands of shells fell here. 25 Israelis were killed in the first hour. Jordanian guns in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria began firing at Tel Aviv. And Jordanian infantry began moving to the north of us and to the south of us to surround the city and cut it off as they did in 1948. Again, Israel had no choice but to strike back. And even when we struck back, on the morning of June 7th, when the paratroopers were up on the Mount of Olives looking down at the holiest sites in Judaism, the Israeli government still wrote to the king of Jordan and said, please, enter peace talks with us, and we won't go into the old city. That's how desperately this country wanted peace. King Hussein never answered that message. And at 11 o'clock in the morning of June 7th, the message came out from Zion, the Temple Mount is in our hands. I bet you're happy King Hussein didn't answer that letter, right? Thank you. But it doesn't stop there. A week after the war, the Israeli government votes to give back almost all the land in Sinai, almost all the land on the Golan Heights, to Egypt and Syria in return for peace. And you know what the answer was? The answer was the three no's of Khartoum. No peace, no negotiations, no recognition. We even asked the Palestinians on the West Bank whether they'd like to have an autonomous entity in Judea and Samaria. 181 Palestinian notables to the man said no. No, no, no. Still, Israel supported Resolution 242 of the United Nations in November 1967, which talked about territory for peace. On the basis of 242, we have peace with Egypt. On the basis of peace with Egypt, we have peace with Jordan. On the basis of all of that, the Soviet Jewry movement rose up against the evil empire of the Soviet Union and played a material role in bringing down Soviet communism. And nearly 1 million of them came to this country and transformed this country, and we were able to absorb them with the plowshares we made from the swords of the peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan. Amazing. All of this because of the Six-Day War. And we received a strategic alliance with the United States of America because on the seventh day, American policymakers woke up and said, whoa, there's this pro-American democratic powerhouse in the Middle East that just defeated 2 Soviet-backed armies. Just maybe we should have a strategic alliance with that country, which has grown into the deepest and most multifaceted military alliance which the United States has had with any foreign power in its post-World War II period. And Michelle knows that as well as I do. True. All because of the Six-Day War. And if the President of the United States is coming here and flying directly from Saudi Arabia from here, and if he's visiting the Kotel for the first time as a sitting president, all of that is because of the Six-Day War. All of that. And if maybe someday there's chances for peace, because nobody was talking about the Palestinians in 1967. West Bank was next by Jordan. The Egyptians were in the Gaza Strip. Nobody was talking about them. All of that is because of the Six-Day War, too. So I think you get a sense of where I come down on the battle lines. But here's the good news. The bad news is, yeah, I'm in uniform this morning, but so are each and every one of you. 50 years, that battle, that decisive fateful war was won by young Israelis, men and women carrying arms. Today the battle will continue, but it's not going to be fought in the sands of Sinai. It's not going to be fought in the hills of the Golan. It's not going to be fought in the sacred streets of Jerusalem. It's going to be fought on the internet. It's going to be fought in the media. It's going to be fought in campuses. It's going to be fought in houses of worship. It's going to be fought in your churches, even though. And today the combatants aren't going to be young Israelis with guns. Today the combatants are each and every one of us. We have to go forth and do battle. We have to. And we will be armed not with guns, not with planes, not with tanks, but with facts, with history. We will be armed with truth. The truth, the most powerful weapon of all. And together with truth, we will go forth because we have the greatest weapon, which is our faith. Together with truth, armed with truth, backed with faith, motivated for faith, we, like those brave Israelis 50 years ago, we will go forth and we once again will win. Amen.